Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Today I've got the Hangman for you in the obstruction, and we got the Fool as the opportunity, as obstacle, danger, sign kind of thing. So, starting with starting with this, um, there are some pretty great interpretations of this card in the when looking at it as a positive. When inverted, obviously all these cards take on a different meaning. And looking at this as an obstacle, I'm kind of interpreting it in the inverted sense, and not just this card, but I'm presuming that it's coming from an inverted, you know, journey. It's that its neighbors are also inverted. So within the context of that, normally the Hangman is a I see it as a sacrifice that someone makes in an almost in an enlightened fashion. Um, it's I think it's a selfless kind of act that creates creates a state of balance between the individual and the world. It's a very early card in the whole progression of the tarot. Still doesn't really involve the sort of human experience of things, and so I think it kind of represents it's the first balanced card. I don't know if you remember two of swords, two of cups, two like all the twos. They kind of have this balanced plurality, and so I think this is a suspension of the self, a suspension of the ego, undertaking some sort of sacrifice to bring oneself to a closer state of balance with the world, right? Kind of a zen-like state. And in the second half of the major arcana here, usually after justice, justice is similar to like the magician, the number 1 card. This is the number 11 card, has a lot of similarities. And I think justice here represents in the positive sense, it would represent an opportunity, this as of yet untapped potential for, you know, anything could happen. Decisions need to be made, but there's a huge potential there. And in the second part of the journey, this is, the justice card to me suggests in the optimistic reading that this is the opportunity to do things in a just world, that the establishment of justice, of something that is going to weigh and balance, outcomes and judge them has been put in place, and now this allows all these different things to come forward. And the response to that of the individual experience could be to, at least in some ways, sacrifice oneself, sacrifice one's comfort or one's mobility or one's point of view to be, you know, to be judged essentially as being just. Like it's a choice that a person can make comfortably, knowing that the world is just. But in this sense, we're looking at this kind of inverted shadow world, and I kind of got this really bittersweet, impulsive interpretation of this card as being the kind of individual who feigns their own weakness, who makes some sort of self-sacrificial gesture, but it's an appearance only, and they're doing it because the justice system, the structures, political or judicial, that exist aren't like they're too rigid. Like normally the justice card is a 1 card, so it's full of potential. It could be kind of could represent chaos in a lot of ways, but the potential is there. I kind of feel like the inverse of that would be this like rigid structure that can no longer respond to situations accurately. It's rigid, it's fixed, it always does the same things. I think there's a lot of places in the world right now, and there have been for a long time, where the legal system can't keep up with all the growth and evolution of the local cultures, and people essentially start gaming the justice system, or they start taking advantage of laws and programs. This kind of just made me think of when there's a program that exists to help people who are victims of something. Some people, I don't think it's a very large percentage necessarily, but nonetheless, some people will game that, and they will pretend to be victims to take advantage of that. And so, upside down, this card is, I think, this kind of card is symbolic of, you know, gestures, empty gestures that on their surface have the appearance of selflessness, ego, ego sacrifice, and it's put on display to show everyone else to get something out of it. And the card following this being death, I think obviously I don't think it necessarily leads to death, but I think I think it is it can be seen as being pretty accurate. I think in the sense that it leads to revolutions and changes, um, things things losing their meaning because they're being taken advantage of, they're being interacted with not in their intended form or function. So it you know causes radical revolutions, upheavals, changes to, particularly, like we see that there's a king figure that's kind of like on the ground taking a nap. Maybe he's done in. His crown has fallen off. Um, yeah, I think that in this case this would not be the good kind of revolution necessarily that makes things better. It'd be like a revolution against a tyrant is a bad thing, but a revolution against you know a really good ruler or a really good system of laws or whatever, that just brings chaos and destruction and madness. But yeah, so this hangman card kind of made me think about the danger either of dealing with someone who is good at manipulating the current laws, and specifically the kind of laws, or even like corporate guidelines or club policies, school policy, any of that kind of stuff, like any structured system of fairness regulation. This is either a warning of someone who is good at manipulating that and playing it, or it's a warning of our own, desire or temptation to play around with those kind of things, to act, to put on an act that maybe you know, we're victims, we're hurt, we're suffering, or something like that when we're not, or at least to exaggerate to get what we want. So I see that as the warning. And then, oh yeah, also in the Marseille card, the structure that this character hangs from is different than the one in the Waite deck. And I think the Marseille one better illustrates that, you know, the the idea to hang this person by the foot. This is what they used to do to traders in Italy, kind of around the time when these types of illustrations became popular on the hangman. Some of them, there were some that depicted the hangman hanging by the neck, but yeah, so the yellow cord with which the hangman is tied up, he's being suspended by an idea, some sort of abstraction or concept. He's being suspended from uh, a piece of wood or something that is balanced between these two trees that have had their branches chopped off. Um, or at least that's the way it seems to me. That the branches are red, signifying action. Like maybe the action just happened. They're also in the shape of like little blood droplets, kind of. That's what it makes me think of. And those what used to be the trees that have now been essentially killed, sacrificed to create this device to hang this individual from. Right. I think that's a part of that dual interpretation of, that there was some sort of systemic structural sacrifice that was made to the systems. Like two trees had to die or be severely, clipped back, damaged, um, just to get this hanging to go through. So I think it does a pretty good job at symbolizing the trade off there between these kind of acts. Like they come at a cost, right? They damage they damage the existing system in a sense. Yeah, then we got the Fool. This is by the way, I think this is the first you know, obstacle opportunity combo where both of these were the major arcana. So it's kind of cool. It's a big deal. Big dealing with big archetypal experiences and concepts here. The Fool is a potential alternative, I guess, to this kind of like feigning of self-sacrifice. I think it's a pretty cool option to consider when dealing with something like that. The Fool is, you know, really chaotic. He's kind of a lot of these cards I don't think are really intended to even be interpreted as individuals. They're I think the use of individuals in them makes it easier to identify with a certain feeling. Um, but yeah, this is the zero card. It doesn't even have a number. It's the same way as the ones. Um, the same way as the ones, like for instance, justice here represent the absolute beginning of a cycle. The Fool is like the meta number one. He's like the beginning of the entire tarot sequence. So this is like pure potential, no structure, with the opposite being the preceding card that closes off the cycle. You know, the world, which is the perfectly balanced, perfectly structured world, the entirety of the world. The Fool is the perfectly chaotic and perfectly singular individual with endless opportunities, whereas the world is perfectly balanced and there's only one way that things can happen. But it's that state of perfection that's like immutable in a sense. Um, but yeah, I think the Fool is. I like in the Marseille deck. I like how he's got these. He's kind of dressed up like a court jester a little bit, and he's got these bells around him. I really like the association of chaos and endless possibilities as being a musical experience, as being an experience of um, the endless possibilities of improvising new musical melodies or riffs or something like that. So I certainly see um, I certainly see that as a useful thing to keep in mind. And the role of the animals in these two cards is kind of different. With the Waite deck, we've got this white dog that's kind of running alongside the Fool, and the Fool's maybe about to step off of this ledge. I kind of generally just think of the Fool as being on a mountaintop in all cases. Like every single direction is a downhill journey. Like doesn't matter where you go, it doesn't take any more effort to go in any particular direction. So you're literally free to just go in any direction, and it's just gonna you're essentially gonna be moved automatically, right? Like it's gonna take no effort. It's very difficult, I think, for people or scenarios or situations to stay in this state because the potentiality to become anything is so high. It's just like this kind of state. I think only lasts for a very short period of time. Um, it's important to be able to see it as something to like look forward to, or even maybe look forward to being able to recognize. But yeah, nonetheless, his dog is kind of running beside him, and the dog is white. I don't know if you guys can hear my girlfriend cracking up in the background. She's watching some comedy. um, the dog running next to him in the Waite card. It's a white dog. It would, in terms of colormancy, it would be representing like order and structure, and he's completely ignorant of it. Some people see this as the dog is trying to like warn him that he's about to step off of this ledge, and this I I could interpret this as, the most basic order of reality, like the before you get into any, meaning of life or whatever, like the most basically ordered thing about life is that like there's life and death, and if you step off of the ledge you're gonna die. So there's at least that order exists, that balance, that idea of opposites. And the Fool is so chaotic that he can even ignore that, like that. not even those Not even those kinds of considerations limit his ability to sort of choose on which direction to go, right? There's absolutely, yeah, it's just total chaotic, inconsiderate potential. Um, with the with the Marseille deck, we got this blue dog, and it's like it's pushing on the fool or on the madman. I think Lemat translates to something like the madman. It's pushing on him now. Again, with colormancy, the interpretation of the blue color would be something more along the lines of feelings, emotions, and I like to think of it in terms of the not just the emotional state, but the underlying moral landscape, and underneath that, an even deeper underlying landscape of virtues, and just like the real deep core emotional experiences that morals are founded on, and it's pushing on them, and so kind of see that as it brings in s- some suggestion of manipulation potentially acting on the fool, like maybe he isn't entirely freely moving around, like maybe he's being pushed forward by some sort of an emotion, some sort of a feeling. Certainly interesting to sort of wonder what inspired Waite to make any of the changes with these cards. It's one of my favorite parts of doing interpretations, trying to figure out like why. I mean, he was, as a member of the Golden Dawn. I think I mentioned this before. He was he was pushing a lot of astrology to fit into this because the Golden Dawn were such a big astrological cult or group or whatever. But yeah, but just going back to the fool as some sort of potential response or remedy to that inverted hangman. Uh, this moment of the fool doesn't last a very long time, and the potentiality is transformed into some other direction, and the only thing that allows for this state to happen is the evolution of the previous state, the evolution of the world, of the sort of totality of everything. Um, it's the world is also a fixed state, similar to justice. They both have that one. This is the 11, world is the 21. Um, instead of instead of reacting to that structured balance with this hangman like attitude of trying to manipulate some of the rules that might be present there. I think the fool here is reacting to the bigger picture. He's not just responding to some of the small aspects of that superstructure. His response is a response to the entire thing. And then the card that follows is the magician, someone who a master of something, could be understood as being a master of all the suits, or someone who is pursuing mastery of them. The magician doesn't really represent a state of being able to will anything to happen, but it starts to represent the narrowing of that potentiality of the fool. So the fool can be anything, and he could be a magician, or he could be any other thing. But the next step of the journey, nonetheless, is that he becomes someone who starts specializing in something. He's still just the magician is still just a channeler of energy. He doesn't really will anything into existence, but in being that channel, he's got the one hand pointing up with the wand, the one hand down. He lets I like to think of, I like when this card came up. I think I was talking about it in the context of like looking at CEOs of big corporations with with this kind of using this kind of theme to maybe understand them better. Like I remember when I was a young rebellious teenager, I would always have this idea, this idea of this like corporate fat cat, greedy, selfish, just all out for himself kind of individual at the top of the structure. And I think now I kind of see those people more like this. It's like, yeah, there's certainly you know, people of distinction, but um, I think the I think the people that consistently stay at the top aren't just they're not really at the top. They're just channeling, the demands of the market, the demands of larger, more complex forces through them into whatever the corporate structure, the industrial structure. Um, but as an antithesis again to the hanged man here, I think I think this is the fool is a card of great. It's a really great card. I think it you know symbolizes like just opportunities. Like essentially anything anything could happen, and it could be good things or bad things. But the hint of the following card of the magician is like you have the and essentially this just applies all the time if you pay attention to it. It's like you always have the opportunity to plug yourself into something, to become a conduit in something. You still won't really have the ability to choose anything. Like the fool also can't really he's not really a choice making entity because that would commit him to one thing. He's just chaos. You don't really want to be chaos for a very long time. I'm sure that's just unbearable, but it's certainly a really great it's a great opportunity to have happen to you once in a while. The ability to actually just, you know, completely open yourself up to new experiences. And then if you go to the next step with the magician, it's like mastery and recognition and a place in the world is created by becoming a conduit, channeling the without sounding too metaphysical, the energies, whether it's like economic, social, whatever, not just, not hoarding it, not endlessly giving away things. It's like a balance between self-sacrifice and like greedy hoarding. It's just letting things pass through you. It's a great strategy too, by the way, for like for entrepreneurs that are in a position. I remember when I used to help some of my friends that were in bands when I was managing them. I would I would sign them up with as many different contractors as possible, on the basis of the contractors getting paid a percentage of what the bands earned. So I would sign them up with like a stylist, a makeup artist, a photographer, a publicist, whoever. These wouldn't be like big time, professionals because they were just signing up with relatively small bands. But nonetheless, essentially promising them that like when the money comes into the band, it then flows out into you, and you could do whatever you want with it. But I remember in that situation, it worked out really well because it's like it it's something that inspires all of those people to now hope and work towards the band doing as well as they can because they're plugged in, they're channeling any success of the band becomes their success. So I feel like that's one of the sort of opportunities of the magician. And nonetheless, we're supposed to be focusing on the fool here. Yeah, the opportunity is there to move into any of these positions to actually do something, to actually become connected with something, I guess, as opposed to um, being a big phony, to game a corrupt system in a manner that will eventually lead to the revolutionization probably of that very system. It's not it's a nihilistic endeavor. It's not going to be something that you'll be able to do indefinitely. I mean, you might be able to indefinitely keep trying to adapt and keep trying to game the corrupt and whatever dysfunctional system, but it seems like the opportunity is here to actually plug yourself into something and maybe not be as picky as to what that thing is. Maybe um, taking advantage of the opportunities as they present themselves, as opposed to having a clear idea of what you are and what you're meant to be doing. That could be a way of looking at it. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up here. Thanks for watching. Bonk the like button if you had a good time. Any comments get entered into a free one-on-one reading every Sunday. So drop me a I want a free reading comment if you want to be entered in one of those. Thanks. Take care. See you tomorrow.